Hi, everyone. Nice to see ya. Thanks for the likes. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to ask. Meaning of life, anything like that.
And next door, the sign said Sir Paul McCartney, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to see him, I'm going to meet him. And then next door, the other side was like Tom Jones and Elton John and Ed Sheeran, I think just started, he was there. Gary Barlow, Kylie Minogue, Robbie Williams, anyone and everyone you can think of. Well, it's an album, it's a compilation album, it's called 10, and it's made up of my career over the last 10 years. 10 years ago, June 2015, I released my debut album, my eponymous debut album, Michael Armstrong, and I've released 4 albums, I think, since then. Yeah, 4 albums, including that one, and a variety of singles. And it just seemed like a good time to celebrate that achievement and to look back over what I've done over those last 10 years. I think as a recording artist, you spend so long working on those albums, writing the songs, then recording the songs, and trying to perfect them, mixing them. By the time you send them out to DJs like you, I'm sick of them, to be honest. I've moved on to the next project. So you don't listen to them again. So it's really nice, particularly like the first 2 albums, to go back and listen to those. And I chose 3 songs of each of the albums, and that was fun doing that, trying to choose sort of fans' favourites, the ones that were hits, and 1 or 2 obscure ones, just like album tracks that I really love and I'm really proud of. So it was a really lovely exercise, and I think it's made for a nice collection.
We might as well be honest, and I'll tell the truth, that we actually recorded this interview yesterday to press the record button. But one of the good things about that is I found out that I had at least one common with the late great Ray Wogan, he was the man in music. And so let's talk about your encounter with Terry.
It was my first single from that first album was a track on the radio years, and Terry Wogan picked it up on his BBC Radio 2 morning show, a Sunday morning show, and I was informed, or my manager Lisa was informed by the producer that he was going to play it on this particular Sunday, and so I got my whole family, parents and the kids and the wife, that we all sat around the radio on Sunday, waiting for him to play the song. The show was 3 hours long. 3 hours we sat there and he didn't play the song, and I was beginning to get a bit dejected. By the end of the programme, I'd been misinformed, but thankfully the very, very last song he played, he announced that here's a brand new song from the new artist, Michael Armstrong, called The Radio. So he played the song. And he then played it for the next 3 or 4 weeks on the Radio 2 Sunday morning show, and then invited me in for a live session. So I went in and played that song and another song from that first album called Allentown. Waking up on the roadside. Over to Cliff's dressing room, and next door the sign said Sir Paul McCartney, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to see him, I'm going to meet him. And then next door, the other side was like Tom Jones and Elton John and Ed Sheeran, I think just started, he was there. Gary Barlow, Kylie Minogue, Robbie Williams, anyone and everyone you can think of. Well, it's an album, it's a compilation album, it's called 10, and it's made up of my career over the last 10 years. 10 years ago, June 2015, I released my debut album, my eponymous debut album, Michael Armstrong, and I've released 4 albums, I think, since then. Yeah, 4 albums, including that one, and a variety of singles. And it just seemed like a good time to celebrate that achievement and to look back over what I've done over those last 10 years. I think as a recording artist, you spend so long working on those albums, writing the songs, then recording the songs, and trying to perfect them, and mixing them. By the time you send James, like you, I'm sick of them, to be honest. I've moved on to the next project. So you don't listen to them again. So it's pretty nice, particularly at the first 2 hours, to go back and listen to those. And I chose 3 songs of each of the albums, and that was fun doing that. Trying to choose sort of fans' favourites, the ones that were hits, and one or two obscure ones, just like album tracks that I really love and I'm really proud of. So that was a really lovely exercise, and I think it's made for a nice collection.
We might as well be honest, and I'll tell the truth that we actually recorded this interview yesterday and accidentally forgot to press the record button. But one of the good things about that is I found out that I have at least one thing in common with the late great Terry Wogan, which is he was a fan of music, and so am I. So tell us a little bit about your encounter with Terry.
Bless you. It was the first single from that first album was a track called "The Radio Years," and Terry Wogan, Radio 2 morning show, Sunday morning show, and I was informed, or my manager Lisa was informed that by the producer that he was going to play on this particular Sunday, and so I got my whole family, my parents and my kids and my wife, we all sat around the radio on Sunday, waiting for him to play the song. I think the show was 3 hours long, and for 3 hours he sat there and he played the song, and I was beginning to get a bit dejected. I think that by the end of the program, I'd been misinformed, but thankfully, the very, very last song he played, he announced is a brand new song from the new artist, Michael Armstrong. It's called "The Radio Years," and he played the song. And he then played it for the next 3 or 4 weeks on the Radio 2 Sunday morning show, and then invited me in for a live session. So I went in and played that song and another song from that first album called Allentown. So it was really kind. It was wonderful to meet him. He was like a granddad. Really. He always, I found out I went to the session that every week he called in, on the way to the show, he stopped at the bakers and buy cakes and buns and things for everyone. So he was really kind like that, and he was very, very, just a real honour to meet the legend.
Can I drop another name in there on your behalf?
Go ahead.
Paul McCartney.
Paul McCartney, yeah, my hero. Paul McCartney is the reason I picked up a guitar or started playing the piano, the reason I wanted to write songs, and just been my hero, still is. He's written most of my favourite songs, and you never, you shouldn't really ever get to meet a Beatle or someone like Paul McCartney. Is probably the most famous person in the world, and I include presidents and queens in that. But I did. I was lucky enough in 2012. While I just started working on that first album, I was working with Cliff Richard actually at the Queen's Jubilee concert, and every star imaginable was at that concert. There was one big kind of marquee dressing room area that was just curtained off, and literally I went to Cliff's dressing room, and next door the sign said Sir Paul McCartney, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to see him, I'm going to meet him. And then next door the other side was like Tom Jones and Ed Sheeran, I think just started, he was there, Gary Barlow, Kylie Minogue, probably it was anyone and everyone you can think of. And I saw that Paul McCartney I had the list of sound checks. Paul McCartney was sound checking them the following morning. And so I made sure I got to the Buckingham Palace very early with my accreditation passed. And I watched Paul McCartney sound check. It was me, Lisa, and a couple of sweeper uppers. I just sang my heart out to him. And you can see him, he was looking at me, and when he came on stage, he came straight over to me and said, oh, hi, I'm Paul. Yeah, I know. And I got to hang out with him for the rest of the I got to hang out with him. I followed him around like a lost puppy dog for the next 2 days, and he was kind enough to not shoo me away. He was very, very humble, and probably one of the greatest experiences I've had.
The thing that impresses me about him, and it's really been through his entire career, is wherever he goes and whatever he does, he seems to me, I only know from singing in interviews and stuff, it seems to me he is himself. He doesn't seem seem to be anyone other than who he is. In a very charismatic way, but also in a very down-to-earth way. Am I right about that?
100%, yeah. I mean, he was just amazing. There were a couple of incidents which, I can remember every single moment I was with him. If I close my eyes, I remember every little lift of the head and every line round etched in my brain. But there was a point when Elton John was having a tea party in the afternoon. This was on the before the concert. And so Cliff was going off to Elton John's party, probably for an AIDS charity or something. And off they all went. McCartney was standing there, and I said to him, you're not going to the Elton John's party? He said, no, that's not my kind of thing. I'm going home for my tea. I just thought that was such a northern, down-to-earth thing to say. And then the other moment was when, on the actual day of the concert, everyone had been away and came back, and he walked into the dressing area and he had his grandson, he was holding his grandson's hand. It was maybe 8 or 9, I guess. And the grandson spotted Tom Jones, and he was, Granddad, it's Tom Jones. And McCartney was like, don't you want to meet him? Your granddad, Paul McCartney, his little kid was just so impressed to see Tom Jones, I think because he was on The Voice at the time. And that just showed to me that he was just a normal guy, a normal granddad. To this kid, he wasn't a superstar, Paul McCartney. The kids were more impressed by what else around him, and I love that.
Well, let's get back to the present and also the future. Really, what does the future hold for Mike Armstrong now?
Well, still, I'm continuing to write. I say this album is a compilation album, so it's giving me a little bit of a break, but all the time I continue to write and I continue to record. I expect I'll have a new single coming out in the autumn if I manage to finish it. That's quite well on the way at the moment. The other musicians have actually just sent me their masters for me, so I should be working on that over the next few hours and the next few days, and changing that around a bit, so that's exciting. And I've got a whole bunch of new songs waiting to be recorded for a new album, so I'll be working on those too.
Long time ago, you deteriorated in the spot, and at that point in his 70s or early 70s, something like that. And I thought about it and I asked him a little bit about his life. He told me he had an allotment. And I'm thinking to myself, is this rock and roll the most rock and roll thing you could be? Or is it the least rock and roll? And at the time I thought it was going to be the least rock and roll, so I teased a little bit. But looking back now, I think that is really rock and roll at that age. And so I'm just wondering what's the most rock and roll thing you've ever done and the least rock and roll thing you're going to make cool.
No one's ever asked me that question before, David. Oh, goodness, the most rock and roll things I probably couldn't talk about. I've done it all, I'm afraid. Pretty much most things you can think of. I don't know, at least rock and roll. I know, I'm actually a very homely person. I love nothing more than being at home and having a drink in my local pub. I've got 3 sons and they're all grown up now, so they come over there with me. And I genuinely have a pipe, a cardigan, and slippers, and I'm most comfortable with those 3 things. I don't have my pipe with me, I was in the other room, but so that's probably the least rock and roll: pipe, cardigan, and slippers, and sitting there watching the television. And most rock and roll is, everything else that I get up to.
Most rock and roll is you met Paul McCartney.
That's pretty rock and roll, yeah. That's pretty rock and roll. I've met quite a few people, but I guess you don't get much bigger. You don't get any bigger than Paul McCartney, do you?
My next guest went from managing his family business to singing in front of the Queen. Good morning. I'm covered in hummus.
It's the new record, Michael Armstrong, The Radio Years.
I think she was either in the music business or a serial groupie. Right. Either way, it was worth getting to know her better. It's the longest love affair there's ever gonna be.
Michael Armstrong, hugely out of dangerously good.
And then McCartney is my hero. To meet him, to get to hang out with him and sing with him was just made everything worth it. I'm not sure I can ever top that, you know.
You may well have heard Michael performing on Michael Ball's show in July, or even on Good Morning Sunday last month.
I love the songs of Paul McCartney and Bob Dylan. She touches my face, she mutters a curse. I reach into her bag and I steal her purse. And I just didn't want to be on my deathbed and have any regrets.
Michael Armstrong, il cantautore britannico.
Joining us on the line now is Michael Armstrong.
Michael Armstrong is here with Michael Armstrong. Michael Armstrong once again. Armstrong, how are you? Great song for the Antics.
Look at my team applauding.
That is very good. I mean, really, really good. Honestly, I've never heard that before, and I was hooked.
Oh, Michael, beautiful. Thank you so much. Absolutely beautiful.
Honestly, the response to you coming to the show before you even said a word.
Welcome to Scotland, figuratively speaking, if not actually in person.
Well, thank you so much. One of my items on my bucket was this Sunday visit Scotland. Unfortunately, I have not been able to do that yet, but I have glowing reports from everyone that's been there, so I'm looking forward to it.
We'd love to have you, but do come in to some place because we've still got some over there. I want to start by asking you a little bit about yourself and your upbringing. I do know that you're the son of Italian immigrants, at least one of them, and you're born in the Depression.
I was.
What was it like growing up in the Depression?
Well, I lived in an area that would be characterized as Little Italy, which meant that most of the inhabitants in the area were of Italian descent. And it's an area called Federal Hill in Providence, Rhode Island. And the area in which I lived, I would suspect that 90% of the residents were either emigrated from Italy or were first-generation Americans. So everyone became a working-class family. My father was a fruit peddler, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, because in those days, mothers took care of their children, and they stayed home, and they nurtured their children, and they cooked for their husbands, and they did the wash, and they did all of those things, and it was just a different world. But financially, we had very little material things in life. Like today, we would be characterized as very poor. But we didn't know we were poor, because everyone was in the same boat, and things that people now consider to be great hardship, we just took as part of ordinary everyday life. And that is that you got up early in the morning, and that you went to work, and that if you were in school, that in many instances you had to work before you went to school and after you went to school, and there was always food on the table. So it was, in retrospect, when you think back, you say, oh my God, how did we survive under those conditions? Because today they would be considered substandard. But we thought they were normal, because we came from a loving family. The basic unit of society is the family unit, and the family unit was strong. So while we lacked material things, we had extraordinary love and understanding and closeness in our family. And I think that is one of the sins of the world today, that the disintegration of the family unit is one of the sins of the world, in my judgment.
Was it a joyful upbringing?
No, I can't use the word joyful. It was, I could use the word loving, because I think that many of the things that would have brought us great joy, we couldn't afford to do. That was for the other people. We were happy, and we had love. I mean, there were very few things that we didn't travel, and we didn't have fancy cars, and we didn't have fancy clothes. Not that material things bring you joy, but in that sense, it wasn't joyful. It was a situation where people were economically depressed, and many times, we didn't have enough money at the end of the week to pay our bills. They ended up getting paid. No one ever defaulted on a payment.
I know that you're from reading about you, your father put a lot of emphasis on education, encouraged you to get a good education.
My father was a pivotal factor in my life. He was actually my hero. not because he was a great baseball player, or not because he was a great athlete, or not because he was a captain of industry, but because he got up at 4 o'clock every morning, whether he was sick or whether he wasn't feeling well, and he made no excuses. And he did that to support his family. And he made sure we had food on the table. And it was his encouragement. Without his encouragement, I would have just taken a job like everyone else, and I don't know, maybe driving a truck or doing something like that, which isn't all that bad, I suspect. But certainly would never have achieved whatever successes I may have achieved in life. But he was my inspiration. He was the person that changed my life around in many, many ways. Not only as a father, but as far as the direction of my life goes. Not only for me, but for my children as well.
And you had to put yourself through school to get education.
I did, and I think back, and I don't know how I was able to do it physically. It was an endurance contest. I went to Providence College here in Providence. I was a day student. I couldn't afford to live in the dorms, and I worked in a restaurant washing dishes, and I worked at the local newspaper company putting papers together, and was able to earn enough money to get through school. But then reality hit me after I graduated from college. My lifelong dream was to attend law school, and I didn't have enough money. I had enough money for half a semester, and that was it. I dropped school in a local high school in Providence, a high school called Hope High School. So I took the first year off. I didn't go to law school immediately. I could not attend. I had accepted at Boston University. Boston University did not have a night law school, so I attended Suffolk University Law School in Boston. And we live in Providence. I was teaching in Providence. So I would teach during the day, then drive the 50 miles to Boston at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and attend my law school, and then drive back, go to law school, go to teach the next day. That was part of my routine. And I actually coached the wrestling team because I was able to get an extra $500 coaching the wrestling team. And that helped me in addition to my salary. So that's how I went to law school. I taught in Providence. I drove to law school nights in Boston.
Did those early experiences, I don't know if I want to use the word hardship, maybe that's the right word, but the hardships that you had growing up, does that give you more compassion now as a judge in court when maybe someone comes in there and they are down on their luck, or they're having trouble paying the bills and they owe maybe $500 or something for parking tickets?
Well, I just mentioned my dad a minute ago, and my dad would emphasize a couple of things. Number one, he would say, don't ever forget where you came from. And that encompasses a whole bunch of things. And he also said something else. I remember sitting by a potbelly stove with the oven door open because it was so cold in the winter that, we didn't have enough heat in the house. And it was a pivotal moment in my life, I think. I was maybe 7 or 8, 10 years old, I'm not sure which, but at that point, my father gave me an edict from on high. He said, someday you're going to be a lawyer. And I never wanted to be anything else. He said to me back then, and I still remember it, he said, and when you become a lawyer, you can't charge poor people, but you make it up on the rich people. And he went on to say, because if we need a lawyer now, I couldn't afford one. He said, so he has to remember that. Don't ever, ever forget where you come from. So the teachings of my dad and his understanding and compassion and his humility, I remember very, very clearly. And I remember his words. So when I look at somebody, I don't look at an offense only. I do look at an offense, but I also look at an individual. And I look at a person because so many times the hardship that people are enduring in their lifetime, in their personal lives, is the reason why they're before a court for something simple like, traffic offenses. I take all of those into consideration. We many times talk about part of our role in life, and I remember, my father didn't use these words, but basically what he would say to me was, when you make it, think of the homeless, think of the poor, think of the downtrodden, think of the sick and the homeless, the hungry and the less fortunate. That's what he would preach, He said, remember the underprivileged like we are, so I remember those things, and I try to employ them in my deliberations on the court. I'm not dealing with machines. I'm dealing with human nature. I'm dealing with people who in our society today are enduring enormous hardship. It's much tougher to be poor today than it was when I was a kid.
Really?
because there's such a disparity now because there's either the rich or the poor, and there are very few rich and a whole bunch of poor, and so I think it's much more difficult today than it was back then.
Does that consideration that you and your father have in that area, does that come from religion or is it something else?
Well, I think religion plays a big part of it. Basically, he was a very religious a person, very strong religious convictions, God-fearing, as I am. So I think that's all part of our makeup, unquestionably.
Now, let me bring you forward in time. At some point, you set up your own legal practice. And what type of things did you get into with that legal practice?
Well, I must tell you, David, that when I first started practicing law, I was still teaching school. I had a night law practice, so I would leave school now, and I had my law degree, and I had a one-room office on one of the main streets in my neighborhood, not the downtown business district, but in my neighborhood. I had a one-room law office, and I had office hours until the last person came in, and many times no one came in. And as far as what type of cases we handled, David, back then, if anyone came in, whatever problem they had, I was an expert in that area. Because by the following day, I would know everything about that subject.
As
But
a like radio interview.
right, so you become an immediate expert. We do a great deal of personal injury cases, and we handle medical malpractice. We have someone else that handles just domestic relations, and we have someone else that handles the state. So we spread out pretty well in our practice.
Let me ask you a kind of, as it's a philosophical question, I don't know exactly what the right word is, but supposing someone comes into you and do you have the expression trying it on in the States?
Do I have what?
Do you use the expression trying it on? In other words,
No.
what it means over here is basically they're like maybe they're claiming for an injury or something like that they don't really have, and they call it trying it on.
Oh yeah, I get that every day. I get that every day.
I know you get that in court, but supposing someone came to you as a lawyer, and you know as a client they're trying it on, how do you deal with that one?
Well, that's an interesting question. I call it playing the switchboard. Remember the old-fashioned switchboards where they would put a plug into these different holes until they connected?
Absolutely.
So you call it trying it on. I have my saying, it's called playing the switchboard. Well, if it's an attorney, obviously they're advocating for their client. But when people come in representing themselves, if they're honest with me, then I usually take a different slant. But if they outright lie to me, then I have a whole different slant on that, And I think our reputation here is that most people know, go in and see him and tell him the truth. You're going to get the best deal that you can. But if you try to come in with a fabricated story and pull the wool over my eyes, then I look at things a little bit differently. But sometimes even, let's assume, David, just for purposes of this conversation, let's assume a woman comes in and she has like 4 kids, and she's a single mom. And she has 3 or 4 traffic cases, and she's scared. And she comes in and she gives me a fabricated story, in situations like that. So now I know she's giving me a fabricated story. So what do I do? So I say to her, okay, you're lying to me. So what I'm going to do with you is I'm going to suspend your license because you can't pay these fines, and we're going to put a boot on your car, and we're going to impound your car. Now what I've done right there is I've punished all those kids. Because she has no money. Her car's going to be eventually, if her car gets impounded, it'll be towed, and she won't be able to pay for the bill, and they'll sell it. But